Welcome back, everyone. So when we look at our React application, we see that this website is pretty static, meaning that things don't really change. Yes, our logo spins, but none of this text really changes, and this link doesn't change where it links out to. No matter how many times you click this link, it's always going to take you to the React website. This is very atypical of the complex applications that we're used to working with. So when we look at our app.js file, that makes sense because when we look at the code inside of here, everything is hard-coded. And you'll hear this a lot when something is hard-coded. What this means is that there is nothing dynamic about the code. The text inside the p tag is exactly what we see it as. This is exactly what we'll render, the string inside of here. There's nothing dynamic about it. There's no way that that string is ever going to really change. But that really isn't useful for us when it comes to building websites. And this is a very important thing to understand because essentially what we want to do is we want to make it so that React will render this string code dynamically based on something. Whatever it is, we want to have control over that. And that's what we're going to go into in this lesson. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change up this text so that it says Hi Yihua. Again, it's still hard-coded, but that's all I really want you to focus on. And I'm also going to create a button instead of that anchor tag. And inside, it's going to say change name, meaning that when you click it, I want to change this name. So right now, it's still hard-coded. And when we go back, what we see is that React has re-rendered our web page so that now it says what I changed it to, Hi Yihua, and it has a button that says change name. Now, of course, when you click it, nothing happens because we haven't coded in that functionality yet. But that's what we're going to do. So here you see Yihua is still hard-coded. It's still not a variable. It's nothing really. It's just hard-coded Yihua. But I want to change this so that maybe when I click this button, change name, this value will change. So how do we do that? Well, going back to our class component that React has given us, React actually allows us to do this quite easily. And what we can do is use a method that we have access to with any class. But React has actually gone into it and made some modifications that allow us to keep track of something called local state. Local state, or just state for short, is just some information that only this component is aware of and can modify and can read from. So the way that we can actually access and generate this state is through the constructor method. The constructor method is a method that's available on all class components, and you can see constructor as in construction. And why that's important is because it's saying that, hey, whenever this app is constructed, whenever it's built, instantiated, any of those terms, I want you to run this constructor method first. And inside of this constructor method, you call super. Super is not actually important for what it does for our React component code as far as you're concerned. All it is it's saying, hey, call super. Super just calls the underlying constructor method of any other classes you are extending from. So here our class app extends from component. Just call super so that you're calling the constructor method on the component. If you're unfamiliar with what that is doing and why that's useful, you can watch a video that I'm going to link where Andre gives a deeper dive on classes in general, and you'll understand what that's happening there. But for now, you just got to understand that whenever you write this constructor, you got to write the super. This is really not that important for how it extends into our functionality with these class components and what we dictate, but it's just something that needs to happen and you need to write. But going back to state, here inside of our constructor function, I mentioned that React will run this constructor method before anything else. In fact, all classes do that. But what I want to do here is I actually want to instantiate this state that I was talking about. And to do that, I'm going to say this, which is referencing this class, this.state. This is something that React is looking for inside of your constructor, inside of your component. I want to say this.state is equal to an empty object. So for now, it's an empty object because I haven't told it what the state value should be. But this state is always a JSON object. And here, what I want to change this to is I want to give it a key value pair inside. Key value pairs can be whatever they want. So whatever key you want to have, and then whatever value you want to give it. Here, because we're working with names, I'm going to say this.state equals a empty object for now. And I want to give it a name key. And this is going to point to a string value of Yihua. So now that I have this, I want to actually, instead of hard coding Hi Yihua, I wanted to reference this state object, and I wanted to reference the name key so that I can get the Yihua value. To do that, inside of JSX, I can actually access JavaScript variables, which is why, as you can see, we're tying what it looks like with the functionality, and the functionality, of course, being the JavaScript. So in order to use this variable, we can actually use curly braces inside of our HTML of our JSX. React is looking through this HTML and saying, hey, whenever I see curly braces, I know you want to access a JavaScript variable. And the variable I want to access is this.state.name. And now if I save this and we go back to our website, we see that nothing's changed. This is exactly how we want it to be. But let me prove it to you. Instead of Yihua, let me say Andre. And if I save, look, we now see it says, hi, Andre. So we know that instead of hard coding, this is now using the variable this.state.name, which right now is equal to Andre. So this is what's so great about using state, because now we're able to cast these variables that React has access to inside of this component. And using this, we now have more dynamic ability. We don't have to hard code all of these values inside of our HTML and JSX. In fact, you can kind of see it actually already being scaffolded out for us here with this logo. But this is a little bit more complicated than we need to dive into right now. But essentially what I want you to focus on is the fact that this is so powerful now. We, inside of our HTML, can directly use and leverage JavaScript variables. And whenever these variables change, React will re-render this HTML that we see so that's using the updated variable value. And this is incredibly powerful. So again, right now, all we know is that we are able to leverage this value that has been initialized when our constructor gets called. But it's still not dynamic. We're still not changing it on the fly, maybe not even through user interaction. But that's what we're going to cover in the next video. How do we update this value? How do we tie some of this functionality to it and then make it more dynamic? But again, what I really want you to focus on, again, is this is how React is allowing us to render and re-render information that represents the UI. So in the next video, let's cover how we can make this more dynamic.